In 2019, an American household earning under DOLA $40,000 could expect to spend about 2.9 times their income on a median-priced home. Just 5 years later, by 2024, that same home now costs 3.5 times their income, an affordability ratio unseen since the housing bubble of the mid-2000s. This isn't just a shift, it's a profound reordering of one of the most fundamental milestones in American life. For decades, buying a first home represented more than just property ownership. It was the tangible beginning of adulthood, a symbol of stability, and the primary vehicle for building intergenerational wealth. Today, despite many young professionals achieving respectable salaries, graduating with degrees, and committing to full-time careers, they find themselves continually renting, postponing homeownership well into their 30s. The question isn't whether this generation desires to own a home. Surveys show nearly 90% of adults under 40 believe buying a home is harder than it was for their parents. The real question is whether the economic landscape that once made homeownership attainable still exists, or if something fundamental has changed in the journey from aspiring homeowner to actual owner. In 2019, an American household earning under DOLA 40 could expect to spend about 2.9 times their income on a median-priced home. Just 5 years later, by 2024, that same home now costs 3.5 times their income, an affordability ratio unseen since the housing bubble of the mid-2000s. This isn't just a shift, it's a profound reordering of one of the most fundamental milestones in American life. For decades, buying a first home represented more than just property ownership. It was the tangible beginning of adulthood, a symbol of stability, and the primary vehicle for building intergenerational wealth. Today, despite many young professionals achieving respectable salaries, graduating with degrees, and committing to full-time careers, they find themselves continually renting, postponing homeownership well into their 30s. The question isn't whether this generation desires to own a home. Surveys show nearly 90% of adults under 40 believe buying a home is harder than it was for their parents. The real question is whether the economic landscape that once made homeownership attainable still exists, or if something fundamental has changed in the journey from aspiring homeowner to actual owner. Consider the landscape of just a few years ago. From 2019 to 2024, the median home price in the U.S., adjusted for inflation, surged by roughly 30%. In concrete terms, a house that might have cost DOLA $270,000 now approaches DOLA $350,000. Yet, for households under 40, their income growth has been far more modest, increasing by only about 9% over the same period. This widening chasm between rising asset values and stagnating earnings creates an ever-growing affordability gap, making the traditional path to homeownership increasingly elusive. This disparity creates a moving target for aspiring homeowners. Many diligently save, accumulating a substantial down payment, only to watch home prices climb even faster than their savings can grow. Imagine setting a goal working tirelessly towards it, and realizing that the finish line itself is accelerating away from you. For a generation taught the value of financial prudence, this can feel like an economic paradox where responsible saving is no longer sufficient. Beyond the initial down payment, the financial hurdles multiply. Mortgage interest rates, while fluctuating, have seen significant increases in recent years, drastically impacting purchasing power. A higher rate means a larger monthly payment for the same loan amount or a smaller home for the same payment. This reality often forces buyers to reconsider what kind of property is truly within reach, if any. Then there are the less obvious but equally significant costs. Property taxes, which vary widely by region, have been steadily increasing, adding hundreds or even thousands to annual housing expenses. Homeowners' insurance premiums have also seen a dramatic surge, with some reports indicating a nationwide increase of close to 50% in just a few years, far outpacing general inflation. These escalating, non-negotiable costs erode affordability even for those who manage the initial down payment and mortgage. Student loan debt further complicates the picture. While a college degree often leads to higher earning potential, it also frequently comes with a substantial financial burden. Studies suggest that significant student debt can reduce a borrower's likelihood of homeownership by a measurable percentage in the years following graduation, and those with larger debt balances are notably less likely to become homeowners. The money that might have gone toward a down payment or emergency savings is instead diverted to loan repayments. The cumulative effect of these interconnected factors is profound. It's not just that home prices are high. It's that the entire financial ecosystem surrounding homeownership has become more demanding. What does this mean for individuals who have done everything right, earned their degrees, secured stable jobs, and saved diligently? We'll explore this through the experience of Alex and Megan, a couple who embody the modern struggle to plant roots. Alex and Megan, both 31, represent a common paradox of modern aspiration. They met in college, navigated the early years of their careers through a pandemic, and now, with a combined household income nearing $160,000, they find themselves in a comfortable, yet distinctly unsettling, financial position. They have excellent credit scores, stable jobs in the tech sector, and have diligently saved over $90,000 towards a down payment. By all conventional metrics, they should be well on their way to homeownership. Yet, every year their savings account grows, and every year the homes they hope to buy seem to drift further out of reach. They aren't falling behind because of reckless spending habits or poor financial choices. Their budget is meticulously managed, their nights out are infrequent, and their vacations modest. They are falling behind because the target keeps moving, not just incrementally, but at a pace that often feels impossible to match. Just last month, they received an email from their landlord. Their current lease was up for renewal in 90 days, with an 8% increase in rent. This wasn't unexpected, but it added another layer of urgency and frustration. They had promised themselves this would be the year they'd finally buy, But that promise now felt like a naive aspiration from a bygone era. They knew if they renewed their lease again, they'd be locking themselves into another 12 months of rising rent payments, money that could otherwise be contributing to a mortgage. They spent the following weekend touring open houses, a ritual that had become a disheartening exercise in comparative disappointment. A modest 3-bedroom starter home built in the 1970s and requiring significant renovations was listed for $480,000. 5 years ago, they remembered seeing similar properties in the low $300,000s. Now, even with their substantial down payment, the monthly mortgage, property taxes, and increasingly steep homeowners' insurance premiums would push their total housing costs well beyond their comfort zone, potentially consuming over 40% of their net income. Megan, meticulously calculating figures on her phone, pointed out the rising insurance costs. A recent quote for a home they liked showed annual premiums almost 60% higher than what their parents paid for a much larger house just a decade ago. It's not just the purchase price anymore, Alex, she sighed. It's the never-ending stream of payments that come after. Every line item is ballooning. They had also factored in an emergency fund, a crucial buffer for unexpected repairs that inevitably come with owning an older home. But dipping into that just to make the monthly payment felt like trading one financial anxiety for another. The looming lease renewal became a pressing deadline. They felt caught between the stability of their current rental, albeit with rising costs, and the elusive promise of homeownership that seemed to demand an ever-increasing sacrifice. They understood the broader economic trends, the limited housing supply, the higher interest rates. But seeing those abstract forces manifest as concrete obstacles in their own lives was deeply unsettling. It wasn't about wanting a McMansion. It was about securing a modest place to call their own, a place to build a future, and that fundamental American dream felt increasingly out of reach. Their story is not unique. It reflects a systemic shift where individual financial diligence, though important, is often no match for the accelerating pressures of a housing market shaped by forces far beyond their control. It's a journey where the finish line isn't just moving, it's becoming obscured by a landscape of interconnected economic realities that redefine what it means to enter the housing market today. Alex and Megan's struggle, though deeply personal, is a mirror reflecting a complex interplay of systemic forces that have profoundly reshaped the landscape of homeownership. It's not simply a matter of individual savings or ambition. Rather, it's a structural shift where the rules of the game have changed, often invisibly, for an entire generation. These forces, ranging from housing supply to global economics, conspire to push the dream of owning a home further out of reach for many. One fundamental driver is the persistent shortage of housing supply, particularly in desirable urban and suburban areas. Decades of restrictive zoning laws, NIMBYism, the not in my backyard phenomenon, and a slowdown in new construction following the 2008 financial crisis have prevented supply from keeping pace with population growth and demand. While some argue that local zoning policies, by limiting density, preserve community character and property values, the undeniable consequence is a dramatic escalation in housing prices. This scarcity creates a competitive environment where bidding wars become common, inflating prices far beyond what a typical first-time buyer can comfortably afford, even with a robust income. Compounding this is the ascent of higher mortgage rates, the era of historically low interest rates, which offered a temporary reprieve on monthly payments, even as home prices climbed, has largely concluded. While a 7% or 8% mortgage rate might seem historically normal to some older generations, it drastically reduces purchasing power compared to the 3-4% rates seen just a few years ago. This shift means that for the same monthly payment, a buyer today can afford a significantly smaller loan, forcing them to either settle for less house, move to a more distant location, or delay their purchase indefinitely. Furthermore, the rise of institutional investors, particularly in the single-family home market, adds another layer of pressure. These large entities, with their deep pockets and cash offers, can outcompete individual buyers, especially in starter home segments. While some suggest that these investors provide much-needed rental supply and professional management, their large-scale acquisitions can reduce the inventory available to first-time buyers and contribute to price inflation, making it harder for individuals to compete in what was once a more level playing field. The escalating costs of homeownership extend well beyond the initial purchase. Property taxes, a crucial revenue source for local governments and school districts, have risen steadily in many regions, often tied to increasing home values. Simultaneously, homeowners' insurance premiums have surged, driven by factors like increased frequency and severity of natural disasters, rising construction costs, and a tightening insurance market. For instance, some reports indicate that nationwide average homeowners' insurance costs have increased by nearly 50% in just a few years, far outstripping general inflation. While these rising costs reflect genuine risks and the need for adequate coverage, they become an additional, unpredictable burden that adds thousands to annual housing expenses, further squeezing budgets already strained by high mortgage payments and student loan debt. Indeed, student loan debt remains a substantial obstacle for many. As discussed in previous episodes, the median student debt load has grown significantly, diverting what would have been savings for a down payment or emergency fund into loan repayments. While a college education is often seen as an investment in future earning potential, it frequently postpones other key life milestones, including homeownership. Federal Reserve research, for example, has shown a clear correlation. A 10% increase in student debt can reduce a borrower's homeownership rate by 1 to 2 percentage points in the first 5 years post-graduation. This isn't about personal finance mismanagement. It's a trade-off embedded in the cost of higher education itself. Finally, the changing dynamics of the labor market play a subtle but crucial role. While many young professionals earn respectable salaries, wage growth for many has struggled to keep pace with the accelerating costs of housing, the gig economy, and more precarious employment, while offering flexibility, can also make it harder to secure traditional mortgages due to inconsistent income streams. Even stable, well-paying jobs often come with the expectation of living in high cost of living areas, where housing affordability challenges are most acute. This means that even with good income, the sheer scale of housing expenses in desirable job markets creates a persistent gap. All these structural forces coalesce to create a moving finish line for aspiring homeowners. They save diligently, only to find the target price and associated costs have advanced even faster. It's a phenomenon that subtly shifts the very definition of financial readiness, transforming what was once a clear, achievable milestone into a perpetually receding horizon, impacting not just wallets, but also the psychological well-being of a generation's striving to plant roots. The cumulative weight of these intertwined structural forces creates more than just financial strain. It cultivates a profound psychological shift in how an entire generation views their future. For Alex and Megan, and millions like them, the dream of homeownership isn't just financially distant. It feels like a moving finish line, a goal that perpetually recedes even as they sprint toward it with increasing effort. This isn't merely frustration. It's a chronic state of uncertainty. Imagine the mental toll of setting a clear, conventional life goal, diligently working towards it for years, only to realize that the requirements for reaching it are constantly escalating. Each year, they save more, budget tighter, and sacrifice immediate pleasures, yet each year, the down payment required grows, the mortgage rates shift, and the insurance premiums climb. This isn't a temporary setback. It begins to feel like a permanent state of striving, where individual responsibility is no longer a guarantee of progress. This persistent struggle breeds a quiet erosion of confidence, not necessarily in their own abilities, but in the fairness and accessibility of the system itself. When nearly 90% of young adults believe buying a home is harder than it was for their parents, it points to a generational reckoning with an altered economic reality. The traditional narrative of hard work leading to homeownership and stability feels increasingly out of sync with their lived experience, fostering a sense of disempowerment. Moreover, the psychological impact extends to life planning. Major life decisions, marriage, having children, career changes, often pivot around the stability that homeownership traditionally provides. When that cornerstone is absent or delayed indefinitely, other milestones also become contingent, leading to a ripple effect across their personal timelines. The decision to rent for another year isn't just a financial transaction. It's a postponement of a deeper sense of rootedness and belonging, a continued deferral of building equity that could eventually be passed down to their own children. This constant deferral can also redefine expectations. What once felt like temporary patience gradually morphs into a quiet acceptance of permanent uncertainty. Some begin to question not whether they are ready to buy, but whether they will ever feel ready enough in a market that demands an ever-increasing list of prerequisites. the stress isn't about failing to achieve a luxury. It's about the struggle to secure a fundamental aspect of the American dream, a modest place to call their own. For previous generations, buying a first home often marked the tangible beginning of financial stability, a clear sign of having made it. Today, for many Americans, it has transformed into a milestone perpetually postponed by forces that often feel largely beyond individual control. Perhaps the greatest shift is not that homeownership has lost its intrinsic value, but that the journey to reaching it now demands more time, more savings, and a level of resilience that many families never expected to muster. It's a reality that redefines not just economic security, but also the very landscape of intergenerational wealth transfer, a topic that has become increasingly central to our understanding of social mobility. For previous generations, buying a first home often marked the tangible beginning of financial stability, a clear sign of having made it. Today, for many Americans, it has transformed into a milestone perpetually postponed by forces that often feel largely beyond individual control. Perhaps the greatest shift is not that homeownership has lost its intrinsic value, but that the journey to reaching it now demands more time, more savings, and a level of resilience that many families never expected to muster. It's a reality that redefines not just economic security, but also the very landscape of intergenerational wealth transfer, a topic that has become increasingly central to our understanding of social mobility. The struggle of Alex and Megan, diligently saving year after year only to watch their down payment target move further away, underscores a profound truth. It's not a failure of individual effort or a lack of desire, but a symptom of a restructured economy, where foundational milestones are increasingly out of sync with everyday incomes. Their story is a microcosm of a generational challenge, where the American dream of homeownership, once widely accessible, has become a moving target, demanding an ever-increasing list of financial prerequisites. This fundamental reordering of the housing market means that the question is no longer simply whether young Americans want to buy homes. It is whether the financial conditions that once made homeownership attainable still exist, or if they have been quietly eroded by a confluence of structural pressures. The path to planting roots, to building that initial foundation of wealth, has become longer, more arduous, and for many, deeply uncertain. It forces us to consider a deeper question. If the entry point to stable adulthood and intergenerational wealth is perpetually delayed for so many, what does this mean for the economic fabric of a nation that once championed the dream of homeownership as its bedrock? What are the ripple effects when a fundamental aspiration becomes an ever-receding horizon, not for a few, but for an entire generation doing everything right